In the heart of Cedar Creek, a sleepy, rural town where life moves slowly and everyone knows each other, the sudden disappearance of Elisa Montgomery shattered the illusion of safety. She was 22, vibrant, full of promise, with her whole life ahead of her. Yet one cold November night, Elisa vanished without a trace, and with her, the truth seemed to vanish as well. Elisa was last seen leaving the Rusty Lantern, the town's modest bar, around midnight. She had spent the evening with friends, laughing and joking like any other night. When she stepped outside to get to her car, no one noticed anything unusual, except that she never made it home. Her car was discovered the following morning abandoned on a lonely country road miles from town. The doors were unlocked, the engine cold, and her keys still in the ignition. Yet Elisa was gone, swallowed by the night. What should have been a swift, all-hands-on-deck search became a sluggish, disorganized response. The Cedar Creek Police Department, understaffed and underfunded, treated Elisa's disappearance as just another runaway case. A young woman who might be chasing trouble or escape. Her family was devastated, and their frustration grew as they watched the investigation stall. Friends described Elisa as responsible, devoted to her family, and utterly uncharacteristic of someone who would simply disappear. Her mother's desperate pleas for urgency fell on cold ears. As days slipped into weeks, the atmosphere in Cedar Creek darkened. Whispers spread like wildfire. Whispers of affairs, drug dealings, and debts owed. People exchanged theories in hushed tones, but no one dared speak openly. Fear gripped the town. The idea that someone in their midst could harm Elisa was unbearable. But the cracks began to show beneath the surface. An independent journalist, passing through Cedar Creek on another assignment, took an interest in the case. She started digging and quickly uncovered disturbing patterns of negligence and possible corruption within the local police force. According to interviews with former officers, Cedar Creek PD operated under an unspoken rule: protect the town's powerful, no matter the cost. Tips about Elisa's disappearance were ignored or actively suppressed if they implicated influential figures. Witnesses who reported suspicious activity near the bar the night Elisa disappeared said officers were quick to dismiss their accounts or question their credibility, especially if those witnesses were young or belonged to marginalized groups in the community. One piece of evidence stood out: a phone call Elisa made just hours before she vanished. Phone records revealed she contacted a local businessman, Jack Rourke, a man notorious for his political connections and rumored violent streak. Locals whispered that Rourke had a reputation for intimidating anyone who threatened his interests, yet the police showed little interest in probing this lead. Why? It soon became apparent that the police department's hesitancy wasn't just incompetence. It was deliberate. Jack Rourke's influence ran deep in Cedar Creek, stretching from the mayor's office to the sheriff's department. Several officers feared reprisals, while others had personal ties to the man, creating a tangled web of loyalty and corruption. The case was quietly shelved as unsolvable, and official statements downplayed any suspicion of foul play. The consequences of this cover-up were devastating. Elisa's family was left in the dark, their pain compounded by the sense that justice was being denied not because of lack of evidence, but because of who was involved. The town's residents, too afraid or indifferent to speak out, continued to live with the weight of the unspoken truth. The disappearance of Elisa Montgomery exposes more than just a single tragedy. It shines a harsh light on systemic problems. A police force compromised by politics, a community fractured by fear and silence, and a society that often sacrifices the vulnerable for the sake of maintaining a facade. This case challenges us to ask difficult questions. How many more Elisa Montgomerys have been lost to secrecy and corruption? How often does power shield the guilty while silencing the victims? And perhaps most importantly, what will it take for a town like Cedar Creek to finally confront its dark secrets? The disappearance of Elisa Montgomery was no longer just a tragic event. It had become a powder keg in Cedar Creek, threatening to expose a web of corruption, fear, and betrayal that few wanted to confront. As the days turned into weeks, the official investigation continued its slow, frustrating crawl, revealing far more about what wasn't being investigated than what was. Elisa's family, heartbroken and desperate, refused to accept the police's half-hearted effort. Her father, Richard Montgomery, a retired schoolteacher with a reputation for quiet resilience, took matters into his own hands. He became a relentless force, knocking on doors, attending every local gathering, and quietly pressing neighbors, friends, and anyone who might hold a clue. What Richard uncovered was unsettling. Elisa had been uneasy in the weeks before her disappearance. She confided in her closest friend, Megan, about feeling watched, unsettling moments when she caught glimpses of a man lurking near her workplace, the diner where she waited tables, and even at her family home. The man's presence was not just creepy, it was threatening. This man was described by multiple witnesses as someone who worked at the local lumber mill, a sprawling operation on the outskirts of town. The mill was one of Cedar Creek's biggest employers, but also its dark underbelly, known among insiders for illegal logging, harsh working conditions, and a culture of silence enforced by threats and intimidation. Elisa had recently started volunteering at a local environmental group, and friends say she was gathering information, documents, and photos on the mill's violations. Was she planning to expose them? Richard shared this with the Cedar Creek Police Department, pleading for them to investigate the mill workers and management. But his words hit a brick wall. Behind the scenes, the town's power players were tightening their grip. Jack Rourke, the local businessman whose name had surfaced in Elisa's phone records, was deeply connected, donating large sums to the mayor's campaign and influencing police appointments. Whispers circulated of a gentleman's agreement between Rourke and the police. Keep the mill's secrets safe, keep the town's reputation untarnished. The police investigation, instead of digging deeper, began to look like a deliberate cover-up. Internal memos, later leaked by an anonymous whistleblower within the department, revealed clear instructions from city officials to limit media exposure and avoid implicating key stakeholders. Investigators were told to classify Elisa's disappearance as a possible runaway case, despite evidence to the contrary. Meanwhile, community members who came forward with information faced intimidation. One witness who reported seeing Elisa in the company of a mill worker the night she vanished later disappeared from town altogether. Others received threatening phone calls, veiled warnings to keep quiet. The mounting pressure revealed cracks in the community's facade. At a town hall meeting packed with anxious citizens, tempers flared. Families of other missing persons demanded transparency. Voices rose accusing the police and local government of complicity. The mayor dismissed concerns as sensationalism, stirred up by outsiders, fueling division and mistrust. In a heartbreaking turn, Elisa's sister, Sarah, discovered Elisa's diary tucked away in a forgotten drawer at their childhood home. The diary painted a portrait of a young woman torn between hope and fear. Elisa had documented her growing anxiety, writing about feeling watched and powerless. Her final entry was a chilling cry for help. She mentioned JR, clearly referring to Jack Rourke, and detailed a confrontation where she was threatened with consequences if she didn't stay silent. Despite these revelations, official statements from the police remained frustratingly vague. Detectives claimed there was no concrete evidence linking Rourke or the mill to Elisa's disappearance. The investigation was quietly downgraded, effectively shelving the case. The town became polarized. Some residents, fearful of retribution, sided with the authorities or chose silence. Others, particularly younger residents and activists, saw Elisa's disappearance as emblematic of deeper systemic issues: abuse of power, corruption, and social inequality. National media outlets caught wind of the controversy, sending investigative reporters to Cedar Creek. Articles began exposing the alleged police corruption and the mill's environmental violations, shining a harsh spotlight on a community struggling to hold itself together. Yet, local government officials dug in their heels. Accusations of media sensationalism and outside interference were repeated in public statements and local news coverage controlled by Rourke's media contacts. Still, Elisa's family refused to give up. With legal help, they hired private investigators who uncovered more troubling facts. Key evidence from the initial investigation had been misplaced, and some witness statements were never recorded. Richard Montgomery's tireless efforts sparked a grassroots movement, with local activists organizing protests, vigils, and petitions demanding a reopening of the case and a federal investigation. The community was forced to confront uncomfortable questions. How deep did the corruption run? How many lives had been affected or destroyed by the silence imposed by those in power? And what would it take for Cedar Creek to reclaim justice? This was no longer just Elisa's story. It was a story about the fragility of truth in the face of privilege, the courage needed to break through silence, and the price paid by those who dare to seek justice in a town determined to forget. The mounting pressure from Elisa's family, activists, and national media finally forced the hands of higher authorities. A federal investigation was launched, led by agents with no ties to Cedar Creek, no reason to protect local power brokers, and no patience for corruption. The federal investigators began by reviewing the files that had been lost or deliberately ignored. They uncovered what the local police had tried so hard to bury: witness statements, surveillance footage from the night Elisa vanished, and evidence of tampering with the crime scene. The footage was damning. It showed Elisa being followed by a man wearing the uniform of the Cedar Creek lumber mill, a man who had close connections to Jack Rourke. His face was blurred out in the local police files, but the federal team identified him as Martin Hayes, a foreman known for his violent temper and threats against anyone who crossed the mill's interests. When questioned, Hayes denied any involvement, but multiple witnesses placed him near Elisa on the night she disappeared. More disturbing were the allegations from mill workers who confessed, under immunity deals, that they were instructed to keep quiet about Elisa's activism and warned not to get involved. The investigation also uncovered financial links between Rourke and key members of the police department. Large sums of money had been funneled into off-the-books accounts, raising questions about bribery and obstruction of justice. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the local police chief resigned amid scandal. Several officers were suspended pending further investigation for covering up critical evidence. But justice wasn't just about uncovering corruption. It was about finding Elisa. Days of intense searches, led by federal agents, uncovered human remains buried deep in the woods near the lumber mill. Forensic analysis confirmed it was Elisa Montgomery. Her death was ruled a homicide caused by blunt force trauma. The chilling details pointed to a brutal silencing. The town was rocked. Families who had long suspected something sinister finally had confirmation. The community's shock turned to outrage. Jack Rourke was arrested and charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice and accessory to murder, though the question of whether he directly ordered Elisa's death remained murky. Martin Hayes faced charges for Elisa's murder and intimidation of witnesses. The trial that followed was a media frenzy. In the courtroom, secrets spilled out. Accounts of a town held hostage by fear and silence, of a young woman who dared to fight for truth and paid the ultimate price. Elisa's family became voices for victims everywhere, demanding reforms and accountability. But the trial also exposed the painful reality of systemic failures: racism and class bias that allowed powerful men to exploit their positions and silence vulnerable people. Many locals were torn between loyalty to their hometown and the shame of its dark truths. In the aftermath, Cedar Creek began a slow, painful process of healing. New laws were proposed to protect whistleblowers, improve police oversight, and dismantle corrupt local power structures. The environmental violations at the lumber mill were exposed nationally, leading to fines and reforms, though many worried about lasting change. Elisa's name became a symbol, a rallying cry for justice, transparency, and courage in the face of oppression. Her story resonates far beyond the borders of a small town, a stark reminder that sometimes the biggest crimes happen not in the shadows, but in plain sight, hidden behind layers of privilege, prejudice, and silence. And while justice was served, the scars remain. Families like Elisa's still live with the pain, the unanswered questions, and the haunting knowledge that their fight cost a life. If you found this story compelling and want to explore more chilling true crime cases that challenge the narratives and expose the uncomfortable truths beneath the surface, hit subscribe and stay tuned, because sometimes the darkest stories are the ones we need to hear the most.